I mention this because it's well known within the illicit drug manufacturing space that Mexican nationals tend to be the best at manufacturing synthetic drugs or at being cooks within that space. Individuals who are responsible for the preparation or manufacture of drugs, including the combining and processing of chemicals to produce the final substance, are referred to as cooks. They are the people making the drugs, not just handling or selling. Synthetic drugs are manufactured primarily for the local market, but may also be sold to markets beyond the border. Since synthetic drugs can be made in the country with chemicals available in the country, it is very rare that synthetic drugs to be imported to the country. However, in February 2020, there was a seizure of 547 kilograms of Mandrax in Durban at the CHC depot. Manufacturers of synthetic drugs, superlab manufacturers, do not confine themselves to the synthetic drug trade. They are likely also involved in the trafficking of cocaine and heroin and other substances.
General, because we're going to move on to a new topic, can I just understand what is the relevance of the February 2020 bust of Mandrax? You're saying that it is a rare occurrence for there to be Mandrax imported into the country because it can be made here. Is that the point that you're making?
That's correct, Commissioners.
And what happened to the 547 kilograms of Mandrax, you know?
Well, the Mandrax was booked into the SAP 13 at Isipingo police station, and the relevance of the referral to this, Commissioners, will be attended to later on in my evidence.
Thank you, General. And then just clarity on paragraph 34. Essentially what you're saying is that the people that have super labs and that manufacture the synthetic drugs don't necessarily just stay within that lane. They can also be involved in the trafficking of cocaine, the distribution of cocaine and heroin. So they could also be recipients of imported cocaine or heroin.
Indeed, Commissioners, these criminals do not confine themselves just to one commodity. It depends on their market and their distribution networks and what's the need for or what is required by the market will obviously depend what they keep themselves busy with.
And then insofar as the markets are concerned, can you just tell us when we're talking about the value of or how expensive the drugs are, what are we talking about? So cocaine versus the synthetic drugs, for example.
Well, obviously cocaine is the most expensive drug of it all, Commissioners. And then these days the preferred drug, in addition to cocaine, is methamphetamine. To a lesser extent, but at a lower level, you will find extensive use of Mandrax, especially in poorer communities, due to the fact that it's less expensive.
And the cocaine, are we just talking about pure cocaine, or is there a process that's involved in the cocaine as well?
Well, Commissioners, obviously criminals will forever remain criminals. And there's no honor between thieves. So especially within the cocaine trade, when the cocaine arrives here, it is fairly pure in nature. But then the cocaine gets cut, so it gets mixed with other substances, so that they expand on the volume that can be distributed into the market by still selling it off at the price that they intend to sell it off as being pure. So it's less purer, but still cocaine.
Okay, thanks, General. And
before you move on to the next heading, General, with synthetic drugs, how prevalent is the is local production, and is there information that locates it per province where you could say we have a big problem of the super labs, let's say, in a particular geographic area in the country, and kitchen labs in a different part of the country?
Thank you, Commissioners. Yes, the kitchen labs are throughout. There's no specific province or area that's least or more affected than another, because that's really for local distribution. When it comes to clandestine laboratories at the level of super labs, we have found that specifically Gauteng, Limpopo, Northwest, and Mpumalanga to a large extent are mostly affected. I'm not sure of the exact reasons for that, but I believe inter alia it speaks to the climate and a more drier climate than coastal provinces, which will make it easier for manufacturing purposes.
One assumes these are on the radar of law enforcement, and is that fight being won if they are on the radar of law enforcement?
Commissioner, indeed, it's a focus area not just of the DPCI, but of SAPS in general, because we are together against crime. And obviously, it's a whole of government and a whole of community approach, where everybody that can assist to dismantle clandestine laboratories, we appreciate such information and operationalize it without delay. So it is a massive focus area of the DPCI and SAPS in general. And it's always difficult to say whether we are winning the war, but because these crimes are committed in secrecy, and you can only count what you have dismantled, so that makes it difficult. But indeed, there is an increase in the need for synthetic drugs, and that's the reason for the influx of Mexican nationals into South Africa.
One hears in popular media, if you like, or in public spaces, allegations about the involvement of police, that these kind of things carry on because there's protection from the police or involvement. Do you have any comment about that? What is your experience, and are you aware? You would be aware of these kind of allegations, and not to say they are correct or not, but do you have any comment about it?
Commissioners, I'm not aware of police involvement in any of the matters that crossed my table, with specific reference to clandestine drug laboratories. I'm not aware of police involvement, but it's highly possible. I cannot exclude it.
Let me be more specific. You, rightly or wrongly, there are parts in the country that are specifically mentioned to be hotspots. Some of them in Pretoria, some of them in Johannesburg. And the allegations in the public space are these, and these are more trading than anything, than labs, it seems, that supply of drugs, maybe let me say, that happens under protection of police officers, and that is why even communities are unable to win when they try and fight that. I'm asking that kind of question.
Yes, Commissioner, I think it's very valid and a valid concern of community members. What I would plea is that if community members are aware of such, is to report that activities to higher levels within SAPS and the DPCI, and we will definitely give the necessary attention to it, and by means of criminal investigations and disciplinary investigations, ensure that we get rid of that rotten apples that are actively participating then in criminality within the narcotic trade.
Thank you.
Thank you, Commissioner. General, the Groblersdal super lab, was that the only super lab that you've been able to detect and dismantle?
No, by no means, Commissioners. On an annual basis, clandestine laboratories of different size and nature are detected within South Africa, approximately 20 per annum. And it shows us just the extent of the activities, but indeed it's a continuous process. So as we dismantle a clandestine laboratory, obviously there are more still in operation that we need to identify and then dismantle without delay.
And the Groblersdal matter, where is it now within the criminal justice process?
Commissioners, it came to my knowledge this morning that the matter is still before court, and there's a possibility of a plea and sentence agreement on the matter. It's postponed until later in May of this year for a decision on that matter.
Thank you, General. Can we then move on to the next topic on page 12, which is mandatory national instructions and protocol for the seizure of drugs? Can proceed from paragraph 35.
Thank you, Commissioners. The DPCI is mandated to address both CDLs, where synthetic drugs are manufactured, and the importing and exporting of drugs. Most seizures depend on intelligence either from informants or international law enforcement agencies, or when it's stumbled upon by port authorities. During a seizure operation, preserving the crime scene for further investigation and the gathering of evidence is crucial. It requires the involvement of various units, including members of the South African National Narcotic Enforcement Bureau, SANEP, detectives, crime intelligence, forensic experts from the Forensic Science Laboratory, local criminal record center, and the protection team to cordon off the scene. Crime scenes must be processed in accordance with National Instruction 1 of 2015, Crime Scene Management, to ensure the integrity of the scene and preserve the integrity of the evidence collected at the crime scene. Failure to do so will inevitably lead to the contamination of the crime scene, to the destruction or non-gathering of evidence, which will ultimately defeat the objective of a seizure operation and compromise subsequent criminal prosecutions. The 2015 National Instruction is based on international best practice. A copy is attached here to and marked as...
Can you just please not show it on the screen? Thanks.
Can continue.
The most important aspects of crime scene management at the drug seizure crime scene, whether at the CDL or elsewhere, such as the harbour, are the following. The crime scene must be cordoned off to ensure that no unauthorized individuals gain access to the scene. Ensure that the necessary role players are present or on standby. In a container drug bust, this would be at the minimum be the DPCI investigators, K9 Dog and LCRC, to collect evidence, including taking photographs of exhibits and of the scene processing procedures undertaken. FSL must be present at a CDL seizure, but are not strictly required at any other drug bust unless the investigation team considers it necessary.
Can you just explain that, why would they not be FSL? What is FSL? What division do they fall under? And why wouldn't they necessarily be at any other drug bust but CDL?
Commissioners, FSL is the Forensic Science Laboratory, and the reason why they are specifically called out to clandestine drug laboratories is because of the sophistication involved with those processes that's taking place there. For instance, they are specializing in the dismantling of these clan labs and the gathering of the necessary evidence from those scenes. it's very hazardous circumstances under which these drugs are manufactured. They have the necessary equipment to dismantle it. And then they must also take samples of an array of chemicals from those crime scenes. So it's rather complicated crime scenes, and it requires experts within that space. That compared to a normal seizure of narcotics in this instance now cocaine, from a container, you do not necessarily need that expertise. The local criminal record center investigators is more than adequate to deal with those crime scenes.
And under what division does the FSL fall under?
FSL falls within the Detectives and Forensic Services under the Divisional Commissioner for that space. Currently, it is Major General Mogale is acting in the post, but the actual incumbent is Lieutenant General Sentumule, who's currently the Deputy National Commissioner, the acting Deputy National Commissioner for the Detective Service.
Thank you, General. Then on page 14, 37.3.
The crime scene investigator must keep proper record of the crime scene by means of contemporaneous notes. Photographs must be taken to illustrate the scene and to allow the chronological sequence of events. All exhibits must be examined for fingerprints and touch DNA, which are crucial in drug busts because of the clandestine nature of drug trafficking. Where drugs are stored in a container with legitimate cargo, there is usually no direct evidence of who or how the drugs are placed in the container. Fingerprints and DNA may be the only evidence that could ultimately link the drugs to the individuals who placed it in the container. All exhibits must be sealed in forensic seal bags with unique seal numbers before being removed from the crime scene. And once all these processes have been completed, the scene must be restored and handed back to the competent recipient. Exhibit management is equally important. Improper exhibit management.
Thank you. Sorry, I think that's fine. I was just concerned that you are disclosing what you do at the actual scene of the crime, and we just needed to be sensitive about that. But the process going forward, I think you can display.
Thank you, Commissioner Kumalo. I think we'll start when we deal with the new topic. It's fine. Thank you. You may proceed, General.
Thank you, Commissioners. Exhibit management is equally important. Improper exhibit management can be fatal to a successful prosecution. Exhibit management must be done in accordance with National Instruction 8 of 2017 and attached and marked as HFF2. Whilst all instructions are important, the most crucial in a drug seizure are the following. The exhibit must be handed in at the police station in the area where the exhibit was seized. All property and exhibits seized must be entered in the SAP 13 register of the relevant police station where the crime was committed or where the property was found, and then transferred to the relevant unit and entered in the SAP 13 of the relevant unit. The SAP 13 registers of these units must be inspected regularly. All drugs, excluding Dagga and Kat, must be forwarded to FSL with immediate effect, but not later than 7 working days in exceptional circumstances for analysis and destruction, irrespective of whether a case docket has been registered or not. This includes all drugs found abandoned.
When you say all drugs, I know we're still going to be discussing the Port Shepstone, but other big busts as well. Sampling, where does it fit in? Where it's not the whole consignment that is taken to the laboratory, but only a portion of it? What regulates that?
Commissioners, under normal circumstances, there is no need to obtain samples at the crime scene. What is being done during cocaine seizures is that there is a presumptive test that is being done. So what that means is that the lead investigator or the crime scene manager would make a small hole in one of the bricks, obtain a small sample, then place that sample into a chemical basis, and that's the presumptive test. And if it colors blue, it means that indeed it's cocaine. So that's the only sampling that needs to be done at that point in time. In order to maintain the credibility of the crime scene, it's important, after all the necessary tests were conducted by our experts, to seal the exhibits there and then, because then you also maintain the chain of custody effectively so. So you've done your counting, you've done your photographs, the investigation to perhaps lift fingerprints or touch DNA from the exhibits. All those processes are completed. Then the exhibits must be sealed without delay on the crime scene. So there's no real need for investigators to obtain samples there, because in any event, the exhibits must be submitted to the Forensic Science Laboratory.
So General, what we see on TV where they test it with their tongue, that's not how it works in real life.
I will not advise that, Commissioner.
Thank you. General, why does it exclude Dagga and Kat?
Commissioners, kat is a plant that's originating from North Africa. Obviously, and that plant needs to be submitted to FSL within a specific period, because otherwise it becomes rotten. So only samples are taken and then submitted to FSL. That's the only sampling. With Dagga, obviously, it means that when a cultivation facility is dismantled, you might sit with a whole warehouse full of Dagga. So it's just not practically possible to submit that whole consignment for analysis to the Forensic Science Laboratory. So it's all about practicality.
And the destruction process, how does that work, and how does one have certainty that there has been destruction of the seized drugs?
Commissioners, I do not have intimate knowledge of that process. It lies within the Forensic Science Laboratory space. But what I know is that upon completion of an investigation or a case docket, if it's finalized in court, we submit a document back to the Forensic Science Laboratory. It's called an SAP 83A, where we indicate that the narcotics can be destructed. The same applies to an inquiry investigation that's been closed, that there's no further leads. We also submit that SAP 83A, and then it's up to the Forensic Science Laboratory to destroy the narcotics that was seized.
And generally, what is the period that we're talking about where you don't have a criminal criminal prosecutions that follow the seizure?
Commissioners, it's very difficult to answer that question, because it's being dealt with on a case-by-case scenario. So each case merits will determine how long it takes to complete the investigation. I think it goes back to proper command and control at unit level that will ensure that investigations are completed timeously, so that it can be driven to its logical conclusion, whether it is towards a criminal matter or whether the inquiry is then closed.
Just explain the difference between the criminal matter and the inquiry process. You seem to make a distinction between the two.
Commissioners, both methods are legitimate manners of investigation. Obviously, a case docket is not necessarily always court ready. But in investigations that needs further investigation before we will move towards to arrest accused and to prosecute them, it's better to investigate it in an inquiry and then complete the investigation, then convert it into a case docket and submit it for decision, or to secure then arrests and place it before court.
Thank you, General. And then paragraph 39.
Before
No.
you go to 39, typically what happens where there's a seizure, but there's no identified owners or recipients of that consignment, what happens? Is there an investigation, an inquiry, and in that process, what happens to the point where a decision is made to destroy those drugs?
Yeah, commissioners, in practice, those type of matters are dealt with predominantly under inquiries. The same processes needs to be followed. The exhibits must still find its way to FSL, where it's examined. You obtain your report from the experts. It's placed in the inquiry, obviously based on the merits, whether somebody or the consignment can be attributed to a person or entity. Then it will be converted into a case docket, and then the rest will follow. Otherwise, if there's no further leads, then the matter will be closed down, and the notification be provided to the Forensic Science Laboratory for destruction. What I can perhaps also indicate is that it does not matter whether it is a case docket or an inquiry, but within this space, we are working hand in glove with the National Prosecuting Authority, and our investigations are prosecutor guided. So right from inception, the prosecution are assisting us. Obviously, we are working collaboratively to ensure that the detectives, for instance, do not miss an important link in an investigation.
With that kind of explanation, would therefore be a record of an inquiry, if you like, for relating to the 30 July 2021, 1,000 kilograms seizure, and the Port Shepstone, the ones that end up getting lost. It's two different things, but would there be a record that indicates an inquiry was commenced and whatever steps were taken?
That's correct, Commissioner. There is a unique reference number that's allocated to each inquiry and case docket investigation, and it is available. It is electronically system driven, so it is available for forever. And then after the inquiry is closed down, obviously it's archived, but still available.
All right, thank you. And the drugs in that case would only be destroyed eventually when